Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending. My name is Mike O'Donnell. I'm the VP of Operations at Magnet. Some of you may know about Magnet and some may not. And for those of you that know Magnet, again, thank you for coming. This is a value-packed day. And next slide. And we're going to be providing a lot of valuable information to you so you can achieve increased cybersecurity. And also for many of you that have DoD requirements such as CMMC, you will have immediate value and understand what you need to do to achieve that certification. And as you all know, this has become very important with recent guidelines that have been passed down by the DoD into the supply chain. So you can see the agenda there. Next slide. Like to introduce you to our team today. This is just a part of the team. These are our front-facing people that you will interact with as you step forward to initiate the actions on cyber. I mentioned myself. My role at Magnet is I operate and facilitate all the consulting to our clients, all clients like you, small to middle-sized manufacturers that grow jobs in the region. That is our mission, to help you to grow jobs, and CMMC and Cyber is part of that. I'd also like to introduce Joe Vinciquerra. He's on the Magnet team, and he's someone that you'll be talking to as regards to engagement.
Yes,
Joe?
I'm Joe Vinciquerra, Growth Advisor at Magnet. I wanted to thank everyone for joining today to discuss this important topic. Please reach out to me if you'd like to know more about working with Magnet on cybersecurity, CMMC preparations. I'd be happy to talk with you in detail about your organization at any time. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize. One thing I forgot to mention, sort of a little bit of etiquette here, that to make it speedy and valuable for you, is that if you do have a question at any period in time, you'll probably get some in a moment, please hover down to the bottom to the Q&A box. We're going to use the Q&A today, and that way there'll be a transcript of all the questions. Hold your questions, and then at the end of the session, Max will answer questions, and then any questions he doesn't have time to, you will get an email back with answers to all the questions that everyone gave and the ones that were not answered during the session. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our counterpart on our partnership here is Justice, and he's the front face for the technical aspect sides of the of cyber. Justice, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Michael. My name is Justice, and I'm going to be your CMMC Awareness Advisor. Myself and Joe might be reaching out to you for attending this webinar.
Thank you, Justice. And Max, you can see his bio there. I'm going to hold off on the introduction of Max. Max runs the cyber business. He's an expert in all phases of it, and he's going to be speaking with the majority of this presentation in just a moment after I just review a couple of key facts about the relationship with Ignyte and Magnet and also other areas and our mission at Magnet. Next slide. So first thing I wanted to sort of mention to you, our mission at Magnet, as many of you know, is to help small to middle-sized companies grow. We only work with manufacturers, and that is our focus. We all know that small manufacturers like yourselves grow jobs and grow business and sustainability for Northeast Ohio. And it's a big number. As you can see right here, manufacturing is an important sector, and it's third in the case of employment. Manufacturing is a great profession to be in, and we should be proud. This data is from our last survey last year of growing concerns of all manufacturers, not just the ones maybe like yourselves that are in DoD, but all. Cyber hacking and online issues, ransomware, all of those things were their #1 concern. Just like many of you that are trying to satisfy the requirements for the DoD supply chain. And as you all know, the criminals are getting smarter and smarter. Thank you for coming. You're going to get some good information today. Who is Magnet? We are a not-for-profit fee-for-service consulting firm, and we have the mission to help clients to grow jobs, make new products, and as such, by having a nice product balance to continuously sustain and hire people. Next slide. 3 areas that we work with clients in upon their request is growing their top line in sales, helping to bring cash to the bottom line to reinvest into the business, which is sort of what we're talking about today, to maintain business and also to bring cash in by not getting hacked and losing business, in fact, and also new technologies, which is also the cyber activity. Next slide. On top line growth, our services are helping clients through strategy to identify new markets and new processes, also business to business marketing and sales, such that they can execute upon those plans to either grow new markets or enter markets where they have great production assets, that they could take those assets to the adjacencies and make more product, hire people, and make money. Next slide. Innovation and technology, that's an area we're talking about today. What are the most advanced methods that you can use to be secure? How can you develop new products? How can you bring them to market? Many times you make a new product, you need new machinery to be able to make that product, because automation, Industry 4.0, and smart manufacturing is critical. Next slide. And most of all important is bottom line efficiency. We find that it's important, obviously, to bring cash to the bottom line. At the end of the day, we make things in Ohio. We make parts, all of you make something, and the skills that your employees need, the leadership that you provide and development for your managers and supervisors, and most of all, the operational effectiveness and efficiency you bring to the shop floor and engagement of your workers such that they can feel proud in their jobs. Making things is the important part of what we do with our clients. Next slide. As I sort of take the next step and introduce Max in just a moment to take you what you came for today, our vision is that as we grow at a compounded rate, we can go from number 3 in the United States in manufacturing, which is awfully good, to the number 1 employer and become a beacon in the region for manufacturing. And we're well on the way, and due to many, many people like you in terms of with the great things you make in Northeast Ohio. If you draw a diameter around Ohio, just the distance of 1 truckload, you hit, I think the number is 75% of the US population. We are in a great place. With that, I'd like to introduce Max. Max will introduce himself and then take you into the details of the CMMC and mitigations. Please put your questions into the Q&A. Thank you for coming. Max?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. And as Michael mentioned, Magnet is a wonderful organization. We just learned about the whole MEP network and how that works to help out a lot of small manufacturers. So in this webinar, we had 50 plus registered, and I think more are just flowing in. So put your questions in the Q&A. I will certainly try to get to them as best as I can. If not, I will definitely respond to you by email or short 5-minute videos. I have been doing those quite a bit. So just as a way of very quick background, I started my career in the U.S. Air Force. I served here at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as an assurance officer, working on different types of cybersecurity initiatives. And today what we're seeing, the CMMC and the DFARS flow downs are just pared down version of what the DoD has been doing internally for a very long time. So our goal really is my goal personally is to distill that knowledge in a way that it makes sense for the small business, so that it's lean, so that it can be applied without breaking the bank. So today we're going to cover a couple of different topics. Things like, what does it cost to be CMMC? What is this SPRS? What does it have to do with anything? And then what are some of the key takeaways as a small business that you should be working on that really don't cost you a lot of money, but you should get started on those as soon as possible. So kind of the bottom line up front in the military, we always call this bluff, like, hey, what is the bottom line up front that I have to know as a business? So as far as CMMC and DFARS, and we'll get into what all that means, it really means 3 impacts, potential business impacts for you. One, first and foremost, you want to do cyber, not just because the government is telling you or your prime is telling you, but you really want to protect your internal data. Everything from your customers, your engineering drawings, your R&D, your intellectual property. So it really targets you to have controls to protect, even though they're calling it CUI and FCI, which are key terms you'll learn about over time, but it's really to protect your intellectual property, right? And then the second thing is if you implement technology in an inefficient way, you're going to increase cost of that technology and compliance over time. So when you go about implementing technology, you have to do it in a programmatic fashion. You have to do it from the viewpoint of the government and not create inefficiencies. And sometimes things like two-factor and encryption, they can create a lot of inefficiencies in your business. So that's another consideration, technology and compliance. And then the other thing is, there's a lot of pressure on the primes to get their supply chain cleaned up, right? And if you're working as a sub to a prime, they're going to apply that pressure to you, and that could result in loss of business revenue, right? That's kind of the biggest area of concern for us when we're talking about small businesses. As Michael mentioned, we want to grow Ohio. We want to retain jobs in Ohio. I'm here in Ohio. Everybody that's online here is in Ohio. And if we start to lose business because of CMMC, that's not necessarily good for us, but a lot of pressure is getting applied to the primes to take care of their supply chain, right? So although DoD is not directly auditing you today, we haven't heard that, they are expecting their primes to take care of a lot of these things. So these are kind of the major impacts. These are the top line business reasons you want to do this. It'll help you build a better business. And absolutely, as Michael said, it is all about business growth and acquisition of more customers. That's the main reason you want to get this done. So this is a kind of a big graphic, but what it entails, it's a graphic that came from what's called the accreditation body. This CMMC thing has been in works since last year. And before that, if you dig through the documentation, the DoD has supplied with what's called DFARS rules, which we'll look at specifically what rules. And overall, the consensus is that most people took the DFARS rules, didn't really do much with them, and now the government is looking at creating a formalized scheme called CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model. So today where we're at, we certainly have applied to be what's called a C3PAO, but there are no assessors. So if anybody is telling you, hey, we can come in and give you a certificate, that's not 100% true, right? There's a lot of misinformation in the market, so we want to clear that up. Absolutely, there's assessor training that's going on and something called provisional assessors and things of that nature, but things are progressing, right? Even with COVID, the AB and everybody has pushed through this, and this is something that isn't going away because there's been deliberate and intentional planning with CMMC for over a year now. So here are kind of the three, so CMMC is all in draft. We know that's a moving target, but what is it that you have to do today? What we have to do today is follow the law that's already been kind of approved, and the arguments are over. And whenever you sign up in SAM, you're agreeing to certain, we call them flow down requirements. So these flow down requirements are, they're called or DFARS 252, 204, and different sections of the 252.204. The bottom line here is that, if you're not comfortable with CMMC, get started on something called NIST 171, right? So everybody that is working on CMMC today, they're looking at the draft guidance, they're looking at what the certification requirements are, so on and so forth. Though those are still in draft, your scoring and what the government is really expecting and where they're leaning on is a base framework called NIST 171. So I encourage you to look at that. I encourage you to also look at something called NIST 171 Alpha, which is the assessment guide. It's essentially the guide that the assessors are going to use to audit your organization, right? So take a look at those kinds of requirements, but the law is there. It means that you need to get started. It doesn't mean that, a lot of organizations we're working with, they're saying, well, we'll get started when it's actually there. That's not 100% true. You are going to face what's called contract modifications to include some of these latest DFAR clauses through your prime, as well as if you have a direct relationship, you might have a government point of contact that might modify this requirement and include it in there because it's in place and it has been in place. So don't wait. Go ahead and start on it as we're learning more about the CMMC scheme and how that unfolds. So, let's talk about the CMMC scheme, what that is, because that is important. I know that's emerging, that's coming out. So So we have the law, which is kind of black and white. It says do NIST 171 and follow the breach response and incident kind of practices and get your assurance certificate and token. But what it's doing is taking all of those rules and putting them in the CMMC scheme with levels on top of it. Now, there's still a lot of unclarity between if you need to be a level, what is the benefit of level 1 and 2? What I can tell you is that most businesses today, if you're serious about DoD, you want to start preparing for level 3. And the reason is that level 3 has about, you could say, 20 additional practices than your NIST 171. So NIST 171 has 110 security requirements or controls. Sometimes they're called practices. And level 3 has about 20 more, right? So what does that mean for level 2 and 1? We don't quite understand what that means yet. We're still learning as the AB rolls out more guidance. But the idea is if you're not working with the DoD in great capacity, maybe you can go for level 1 and 2. The specific requirements around level 1 and 2, we're still waiting on those, right? Because you still have to follow the law, which says do 171. So the implied requirement by the DoD, a lot of people are preparing for level 3. Now, level 4 and 5, again, we don't have clarity around that, but if you are a business today that holds what's called a DD 254 contract, essentially it's a classified contract, you understand the need for security, you have a facility clearance, you might have other kinds of work within that area. What we have been hearing is that level 4 and 5 is going to be for DoD providers with other requirements than just CUI, right? So kind of one of the first questions you should ask is what level is right for your business. I would say that if you're doing more than 10 to 20% of your revenue is coming out of DoD and the goal is to grow that revenue, you should look at level 3 as a serious consideration. Or if you have a strategic contract, even if it's less than 5%, but it's a strategic contract with the DoD, go to level 3 and start there again, which is the 171 requirements. Level 4 and 5, we recommend waiting on that until we have clarity around what that even means. And the other thought is that if you're working within areas that are already classified, you most likely have what's called an information system security manager. You most likely are familiar with risk management framework, which is under a different authority. And so a lot of those level 4 and 5 requirements and practices, when they come out, they're most likely going to come out of a different framework altogether. Again, these are things that are in draft. So today, prepare for level 3 and start working on NIST 171 because that's the base framework that everybody is using today. So again, the main difference between the two, right? Just as a kind of a summary, a lot of people ask us, hey, can you work with us for 171 and then get us ready for CMMC? The answer is absolutely. That's the idea, is that if you are taking the law serious and doing what has been written down for quite some time, you should be able to easily mature and evolve into a CMMC scheme. The difference between the two is, like I mentioned, it's only about 20 additional requirements. So as you go from NIST 171 to CMMC, the work should not be significant if you do it with full integrity and using the full framework. And what I mean by the full framework is a lot of people look at just the NIST 800-171 document, also look at the sister document called NIST 171 Alpha. Those are all of your test cases and assessment guidance. So when you do get audited or are going up for some sort of a certification, the auditor walks in with a different set of documentation than you. So earlier you can understand the two sets of documents that are needed for CMMC, the easier time you're going to have, right? And just to kind of give you an idea, the 171, as I mentioned, has 110 requirements. In order to test those requirements, there are about 300 test cases is what they call them, right? So the auditor walks in and runs through all the different test cases and they all line up with 171. So if you're doing that, when you go over to the CMMC scheme, it should be a non-event. It should be a non-issue. But if you haven't been doing that, this is going to be a huge, sometimes we call it a technical debt because you've accrued it, you haven't done anything with it, and now all of a sudden you're facing more requirements than you thought. So we encourage you to understand the difference and get started on the base requirements of 171 as soon as you can. So here's the journey we recommend. This is, again, we recommend you sending us questionnaires that you have. Everybody has a different journey. Right before this call, I had a CEO email us about, hey, we received a bunch of cyber awards. Do we need to have and we're renting space. Do we need to have somebody walking around in our facility for janitorial services, right? And then I receive other kinds of requests. Hey, we're under a contract right now, and I need to submit my SPRS score. The point is, your journey depends on your business. So what we're going to do here is kind of give you best practices, things that you need to do. If you haven't started that journey, where could you start? But if you're already in the middle of it, we encourage you to reach out to Magnet, to Joe, or to Justice, and we can start to augment and accelerate the journey that you're already on. So first of all, one of the things that you need to be aware of is something called the SPRS score, or SPRS, Supplier Performance System and Reports. This scoring system is developed by the US government, so it's not owned by, if you hear things like ExoStar or any of the platforms out there, it's not that. It's a US government system, and it falls within the same branch that really looks at supplier performance and evaluation. If you are a government player, you might be aware of what's called CPARS, Contractor Performance Reporting. This is the same agency that manages the supplier risk system. So one of the things you need to do, you have to submit your own self-assessment, the scores on how to do that. We can send you how to do that. But before you can get into this system, you need to go ahead and register for this environment called PIEE, Procurement Integrated Enterprise Environment. So to do that, you need to have a DUNS number, you need to have a cage code, which you most likely already have, and then you use those two items to get access into this PIEE number, and only then you can be granted access into SPRS. We help with that here at Magnet on how to do that. But once you have access to that, one of the things that you need to do is submit to the government how mature you believe you are, and that's done through some sort of a scoring scheme. Now, this information, we have been hearing that suppliers are concerned about, can anybody have access to this? Who has access to this? So if you're a small business, you as a small business, you might be getting flow down requirements from your prime. Your prime is asking you to go submit the scores directly to the government. Only the government has access to this, and only you as the contractor has access to this. And this information is so sensitive about your business that it's not releasable under what's called FOIA, or Freedom of Information Act. So nobody has access to this. You're not disclosing your scores to your prime. There's a lot of concern about, hey, if we have a low score, what do? You're not disclosing anything to the prime. But this score is protected or under what's called the False Claims Act. So you don't necessarily want to give yourself a great score. You don't want to give yourself a poor score. You want to give yourself an honest score, something that you can defend in case you do get audited someday by the government, because it is submitting directly to the government. So we help you figure out how to submit that score, and we build a kind of a continuous scheme of how do you update your score to show improvement within your environment. So today, if you're doing business with the DoD, this is one of the first things you got to get done. Many CEOs we work with, this is, again, instead of starting the journey with the NIST 171 assessments, we're really focused on getting your business registered properly and allowing a first cut of score to be submitted so the business can continue to flow, right? So that's kind of the first area. The other thing, this is kind of a crazy chart, but this is public information, but this chart, what this illustrates is that the SPRS system is not necessarily a cybersecurity system. It's not designed to help the government entirely manage your cybersecurity efforts. As you can see, some of the other systems that connect to it are pricing data, Bureau of Labor and Statistics, the SAM data, right? E-procurement data from DLA. So the system is being set up as a potential future, evaluation criteria. Today, we're not seeing that, but because of the way it's being interconnected and where it sits within the government agencies, just like when you bid on a contract, you're measured against pricing, quality, capability. In the future, we could see the government where they're looking at a cyber, hygiene as you could say as a criteria of evaluation for contract. So now you as a sub, you may say, well, I don't ever work with the government, so why do I have to worry about it? It's all about your prime, right? Your prime submits the contract. They might have to disclose who they're teaming up with, and then somebody on the government side can check all the different areas of sam.gov if your sub is registered, and all the different systems that you're supposed to be registered in to tell the prime if their supply chain is clean or not. So though you're not working directly with the US government, this is going to come down through your prime supplier relationships. And that's why it's very critical for them to have you register in this. Because if they submit their full team and you're part of that team, it's disclosed to the government, it could disqualify them for certain strategic contracts that they're going after, right? So very important as a business owner and a managing director here at Ignyte. We work with the government and we understand the speed that you need to execute this. So one of the first things we recommend is get your supplier performance risk score done at whatever fidelity you can execute them with today. So the next question we get in terms of the journey is, hey, Max, what is this going to cost me? And where do I get the money from? What about the reimbursement? What's going on in the market, right? And I'm getting my quotes and I'm getting pricing from all over the place. So we want to be very transparent and disclose what we know today, right? So from a business standpoint, a small business or a large, you should look at this whole thing as a total cost of ownership. It shouldn't be, hey, I work with Magnet, I work with my IT provider, I work with so and so. As a business leader, look at this whole thing as a total cost of ownership. In the total cost of ownership model, or thinking about it in that concept, you have three cost elements. You have the program management and development side of it, basically building out your CMMC program, which is beyond just compliance. And we can talk about what that means. Then the second is technology engineering and implementation. So you can think of that as your hardware, your firewalls, and single sign-on and encryption and all the things that we like to talk about as cyber people. And then the third area is audit and certification. So all three of these areas is going to formulate your total cost of ownership. Today, we don't really understand the certification and audit side because that's not finalized, right? So there's an element of uncertainty on understanding the total cost. The program management and the technology side, they go a little bit hand in hand. What we recommend is start with the program so you can properly scope up or down depending on your business. Right? There's this data called CUI. Some people are saying, hey, let's just do an implementation where we'll dump all the CUI in there and work with that. Sometimes that would work, but most of the time under an audit, the auditor knows that, hey, this is an empty kind of environment. You're not doing anything with it, so you may not pass the audit, right? So why spend money in an area that you know may or may not pass? So we believe that the program management side is such importance to scope out technology because there are some things you may or may not need to purchase. And then also it helps you manage the audit and the certification side because the thought process is it's easier to critique the environment than it is to create the environment, right? So as you have more oversight and control over the program, you're going to be able to make better technology decisions and better audit and certification decisions when the time comes. So because of these uncertainties on technology and audit, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. You'll see pricing, depending on your business, anywhere from $25,000 to $200,000 with claims such as, hey, you go to the cloud environment and we can take care of all of it for you, right? So you want to substantiate a lot of different claims, and you really want to understand what are the factors that are building up the cost, right? Now, on the right-hand side, you see this chart here. The government, whenever they do provide any kind of new legislation, they generally do what's called some sort of a financial impact analysis. essentially it's saying, can small businesses afford this? And if so, what would they have to pay out of pocket? And so we can send you the link. This is out on an actual .gov website where they break down the cost, but the total annual cost, for a level 3, they're saying at $60,000. Now, the government's view of a small business, according to the set aside rules and the NAICS codes and all of that, it's usually much larger than a typical MEP business, which could be less than 50 people, right? So we're sensitive to these kinds of things, these kinds of numbers. And this is why we're partnering with Magnet to figure out how do we help you and how do we standardize some of these things and make them repeatable. So the bottom line is that the market pricing for CMMC is really not clearly understood. We want you to understand the total cost of ownership. We want you to question whoever you're working with on how are they coming up with the cost, because there's nobody that can guarantee a certification. That's not understood. The technology side is not well understood, but the program management side is pretty well understood based on just the law itself, right? So that's in terms of understanding cost of compliance. We are still waiting on guidance from the government on allowable cost, and if the small businesses are going to be able to recover it. We'll have a special webinar, perhaps by an acquisition professional later on in the month, or perhaps next month, that'll cover from a procurement perspective, what does allowable cost even mean in context of small business versus a prime business, right? So we're still waiting on a lot of the cost reimbursement messaging that was initially delivered by the DoD on what it means to the small businesses. But the good news out of all of this is Magnet, right, is a public-private entity. This is where we believe Magnet can be of great help to the small businesses in figuring out how to make some of these numbers work, and also scaling these numbers in a way that it benefits the most constituents in Ohio. So cost is a good question, something for you guys to understand. Now out of all of this, what can you do by yourself? What can you get started on today without spending a dime, right? This is all element of time and just, taking over the program and managing it proactively. So the DoD has kind of put out a couple of different, you could say, official trainings. So we're still waiting on the accreditation body to build out their training, and there's a cost of using that training, but the DoD actually went ahead and put some training together. So one of the first websites we recommend, it's called the CUI training website. We'll send you the link after this. It's on usalearning.gov. But essentially, the biggest concern here from the government is not about NIST 171. It's about protecting their data, called CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information. There's official training out there on what CUI means. There's, in terms of how your business has CUI and does not have CUI, and how to identify CUI, how to mark CUI. Generally, you would pay a practitioner like myself or a cyber company to come in and teach you these things. But we encourage you to go ahead and get started on the DoD website, which actually walks you through some of these things. The second training that we recommend is out on a website called Ignyte Institute. This training has been actually funded by the Department of Defense, and it covers two areas: a senior management course, which is about 20 minutes, somebody who's non-technical, somebody who runs the business, understands the financial portions of the business, the contracting, the marketing, just a C-suite leader on what they need to know. The second area of training is the practitioner level course. So if you're a quality professional or a machinist or anybody running IT, typically in a small shop, you're wearing several hats, and you want to understand from a practitioner practice perspective, what is CMMC? We also have a CMMC level course out on the Ignyte Institute. We encourage you to check that out. The other kind of aid available is directly from NIST website, as well as sample SSPs, and which stands for System Security Plan, and POAMs. You can download a lot of this content either from our website, NIST website, or the US government website. Again, it's designed to kind of get you the training. Perhaps you need a guided assessment. Maybe that's where we come in. Perhaps if you need help with that, or maybe you have help internally from IT, we encourage you to kind of get a guided assessment done, get your SSP and the POAMs that need to be in place, and then put some kind of program metrics and management. Can't stress that enough. If you don't have oversight and management, you will end up buying so many IT platforms, firewalls, servers, and by the time the audit rolls around, as we know in the IT world, you're going to need to do a complete tech refresh. So make sure you're lining up all of these investments with the journey of the business versus creating solely a CMMC journey and not really taking the business into consideration. So these are some of the resources that are available to you. So like I mentioned, the Ignyte Institute courses, there's a senior management one for 20 minutes, practitioner for 1 hour, and then definitely the DoD CUI training if you have not done that today. Both of these areas are professional learning management environments, and they issue certificates. These certificates count towards compliance. If you read through the rules, there's a family called awareness and training. Once you get your certificates and for your workforce, this counts towards compliance. So in terms of the best practices and the summary, we'll go through this for about another 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll start to look at answering some Q&A that you may have had. Now, as I'm going through this, as I've gone through a lot of this content, I'm moving fairly quick. If you have questions, please type them, and you can also email us. But if you type the questions, we'll try to answer them towards the end of this webinar. So kind of, the summary is that this is we admit this is a barrier to entry doing business with the government. So what we want to emphasize is get training ASAP, right? Don't delay on learning about this new requirement. A lot of businesses believe that this will just go away. It will not go away. We encourage you to get ahead of this and start to address it. Even if you're doing a little bit at a time, it's going to help you versus not doing it at all or ignoring it altogether. If you're serious about DoD, if you care about the revenue that's tied to the DoD, whether it's direct or as a subcontractor, don't ignore this. It's very rare to see the government completely undo a legislation. I've never seen that. They might ignore it, but not undo it. This is a bipartisan issue. Cybersecurity is on top of minds for almost every president that has came in, and then also for all of the different legislators out there, and because it impacts them personally. So whether they understand the impact to small business or not, they understand cybersecurity, and they're going to start pressing on this. So don't delay, get training, get qualified. The next thing is, in order to enable your business to keep going, prepare for your SPRS score today. Get whatever help you need. But one thing we will caution you against is don't submit a perfect score. The government knows there is no perfect environment. It's going to come off and give a red flag unless you truly have a perfect score, unless you truly have done all the things you need to. Because when you submit something to the government, you're subjecting yourselves to the False Claims Act, meaning you have to be able to reasonably back up what you claim, right? So not giving you any legal advice or attorney advice, but at the same time, when you provide something to the government in an official government database, you want to make sure that everything that you're claiming it to be, for it to be truthful, right? And we can always improve the score. We can always resubmit the score. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. But as of right now, today, that should be one of your number one priority. The next thing we want you to do as an executive who's managing a company is we want you to go ahead and, if you're serious about this, go ahead and communicate with your prime. Your prime is essentially one of the lines of revenue for you. Those are the teams that are bringing in business for you. So you want to communicate proactively to them that you're actually going ahead and moving forward on CMMC if that is your intention, or with NIST 171, because ultimately the primes are going to be held for cleaning up their supply chain. Now, if they're held accountable, they're going to start sourcing other suppliers with your same type of service. If you continue to say, I don't want to do it, I won't do it, or hey, it's not applicable to me because of whatever many reasons, they will essentially look at that and say, you know what, I'll go find another supplier. I'll source another supplier, because they're not going to risk a multi-billion dollar contract for a small contract that could be significant to you, right? So today we want you to start to proactively communicate with your prime on the progress you're making. You don't have to disclose any information to them and nothing sensitive, but you do want to be proactive about communicating your progress against this. The last thing is, because of the barrier to impact and doing business with the government is becoming harder and harder, we at Ignyte, we work with so many CEOs, so many small businesses. We believe that the MEP model, the way the government has structured it, is truly designed to help the manufacturers across the United States. So we help with the risk management, cyber and IT and all those kinds of things, including things like top secret clearances and things of those nature. But none of those things matter if your finances are not in order, if you don't have a sales strategy, if you don't have a marketing strategy, if you don't have a quality system. So this is where we believe the MEPs are in a prime position to help you kind of address some of the strategic questions that you need to be answering to before you get into cyber. Or maybe cyber has become a strategic concern. Reach out to your MEP, reach out to Magnet. They're actually there to help. They're a public-private entity. Essentially, that means they're a kind of a quasi-government organization designed to help local manufacturers retain jobs, grow jobs. Never seen an organization like that in any other vertical except for manufacturing. So that should be part of your journey, whether you work with a cyber supplier or not. Definitely touching base with your MEP, manufacturing extension partnership should be part of your journey. Now, here's the summary, kind of key takeaways. And then after that, I'm going to hand it off to Michael to kind of read some questions that we have. So number one, right, leverage Magnet, kind of primary resource. You can definitely reach out to Ignyte. We help out a lot of customers directly. But if we start to see that, you know, it's not just cyber, you have other issues with the CEO, maybe it's a grant issues, maybe it's payroll. We will bring you back to Magnet because they want to help you grow the business, not just taking care of concern for today. Not right after that, take a look at CMMC NIST 171 because you're going to have to answer some of those questions with whatever fidelity to prepare for your SPRS score. You want to submit that score right away because that is what is going to enable your business. That's what's going to allow you to continue to bid on DoD contracts through a sub or a prime relationship, right? And then the next thing I want to talk about is, again, understand the total cost of ownership. Don't go out and buy IT hardware. It's going to need to get refreshed. Don't go buy a firewall. Understand it from a total cost of ownership. Start with the program, then start with technology. Then when we understand more about technology as well as the audit cost, as those things come into kind of visibility, you as the CEO or a senior leader, you'll have more understanding of the total cost of ownership, but proactively manage the program. What the government requires is really responding to the legislation and complying with the legislation. What they can't tie your hands on is buying certain set of technology, which is, you know, Cisco versus Juniper. The government doesn't do that. They don't enact technology, they enact policy. So start with the programmatic side of the house, and it will help you take control of this problem at a lot better pricing and a lot better cash management way instead of just buying all the hardware. We've seen that so many times, and by the time audit rolls around, it all needs to be refreshed. So can't say this enough. If you're not comfortable doing any of this, get help. MEPs are here to help. Go to the DoD website that we send to you, start taking the training, go to Ignyte Institute, start taking the training so you can get help as soon as possible. This is not easy. Even as me as a cybersecurity professional, I'm still learning on this journey. There's new things that we learn all the time based on what's happening. So I encourage you to just kind of step back and really get the help that you need, or start to learn before you start to invest deliberate dollars into areas that may not be of help to you when it comes time for the audit and getting your qualifications. So with that, I'll pass it over to Michael. Our contact information is here. We'll answer any questions that you have, and we're happy to be of service to you and your organization. Michael, back to you, sir.
Thank you, Max. Hopefully you've all gotten some good information. If anything, I think a couple of the themes Max said is number one, as you probably all know, CMMC DoD requirements are not going to go away. Many of you are probably already started on your journey and taken some actions. Maybe the number one take home might be wherever you're at, whatever you've done, don't be hesitant to reach out for some advice. We'd be, wherever you are, we would want to help you to get there to the end game and succeed more quickly and efficiently. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and read some of the questions first that we have. And after we get through those, if there's others, you can continue to sort of type them into the Q&A. So the first question I have, Max, is that it's talking about the no-cost cyber hygiene and penetration testing that's provided by CISA, C-I-S-A. This individual said they learned about it, and they're wondering how that might relate to the CMMC and what you think about that.
Yep. So this is a great question and actually asked quite commonly. So CISA is a good organization. It's ran under Department of Homeland Security. It's a different mission, right? So there is an overlap. Obviously, when it comes to technology, there's always an overlap. But when it comes to the program, these are two different things entirely. I don't know about the penetration testing and the cyber hygiene. I do know that they will do some of those things a little bit more seriously if you're under what's called a critical service provider to the US government, but also to our economy. And what I mean by that is like a water dam, right? That's a very critical infrastructure. So if you're running a water dam or if you're running certain types of financial services institution, let's just say a credit union, and you're managing people, you're managing your population's wealth, you fall within an area where if there's an economical disaster, or if there's a disaster, it would impact the entire economics of that geography, right? So bus systems, railway systems, certain financial institutions, that's what that resource was originally stood up for by DHS. It's under that sort of mission, right? Now, since that time, I believe that program has evolved. If you can go ahead and get that, great. But the probability of you getting the full assessment and penetration testing is going to be slim, because that program's intent was designed to handle our critical infrastructure, companies that are running SCADA devices and things of that nature. So if your company falls within that, I would go ahead and get that. But if you're not a part of that, you may have a difficulty doing that. A follow-up question to that, Michael, is a manufacturer who makes parts of nuclear submarines. It might be critical to the Department of Defense. Absolutely, it's critical. But is it critical to our economy? Is it critical to our local way of living? That is something I think DHS and CISA would have to determine. My gut says no, because they are limited on their resources. I had actually a friend who works within one of the regions. I believe there are about 6 regions. So they might do a basic assessment, but a serious, considerable penetration test requires serious skills and also allocation of resources. So you'd have to make that case to them that, hey, we impact not just the DoD, but also the local economy. And that might be a tough case to make as a full private business. Usually these institutions are quasi government institutions. And that's the most clearest line I can draw when it comes to critical infrastructure. It's a very fuzzy definition, but we have seen other organizations in different category leverage this service. Today, there is no what's called a cross map between CMMC and also what they do. They use an entirely different program, entirely different framework when it comes to measuring your cybersecurity. So will it help? Yes, to some degree, but it can also create more work, because now you have to translate all of that work over into what does it mean for CMMC and NIST 171.
Thank you, Max. Another question here. The point you made to reach out to the primes is understood, but the question is, should we advertise in some way on our website or in another fashion to let our customers know, all of our customers know about what we're doing?
So for right now, I'd recommend waiting on any kind of proactive advertisement. And the reason is because the CMMC AB themselves, they own the logos and everything like that, as far as I understand it. So the way we want to communicate is really, going back to what the legislation says through some sort of an email communication. Here's what we're doing, here's our plan, and not really disclosing any specifics. When you are certified, sometimes in the future, this will become an advertisable kind of qualification. But for now, I believe you should not proactively advertise it. You should advertise it you should really inform them through informal conversation, or also through kind of directly via emails when you're getting any kind of hammered by questions coming in through your buyer side, right? If you're working with a large prime. So as of right now, I would leave everything off the website unless you've made considerable progress. Our organization, for example, we made considerable progress and got certified by something called ISO 27000. It's a cybersecurity qualification on an international level. We advertise that, but all of the readiness work that went into it, we did let our customers know, but it was more discreet. It wasn't necessarily advertising, because we definitely don't want to start to claim any kind of false advertising narrative that, hey, we're already certified and whatnot. So, and there's a lot of that going on, but that's how we recommend proactive communication, is just so you're not being disqualified. That's the point of that, is that just so you're not being disqualified, they're not marking you up in a category of supplier that may need to be replaced altogether.
Another question here: who is requiring the self-assessment? Is it a law?
So if it's a law or not, I'll leave that to the legal practitioners. Maybe one of these webinars, I will bring in a prior Air Force attorney that works with us as a JAG. The organization that's requiring the self-assessment is a organization agency out of the U.S. government. I don't remember the name, but I think it's the Defense Contracting and Pricing Management Agency of some sort. So, is it a law? That again, I'll leave that to the actual attorneys. But think of it as very similar to: is it required for you to register yourself in SAM.gov? Well, if you want to get paid, then it is, right? Is it voluntary? Totally. You can say I don't want to work with the DoD, and I don't want to submit any of my information, and I certainly don't want to register in SAM.gov. That means you don't get to participate in the defense industrial supply chain. But if you are working with the DoD, this becomes a requirement that is imposed on you, and you have to follow it. And at some time, it'll become either a yes or no. Are you in the system or not? Right. So that's kind of how we're viewing it today, is that if you want to participate and you want to be part of the DoD supply chain, you must be registered on all of these different systems. And SPURS is one of those systems and assessment that's becoming a new requirement.
Thank you, Max. Here's a question. Someone's asking, can they receive a copy of the slideshow, and how would they receive it?
Sure, absolutely. So we are actually recording this. So this is all live, and you'll get copy of the recording. You'll get copy of the slideshows. We'll most likely send it out on an email, or perhaps publish it on Slideware or somewhere where it's publicly available. So we'll make it available to you and everybody who's attended, and everybody who missed it. We'll send out a copy of this slideshow, and absolutely. But that should be available to you right after this, probably within the next 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, and in the spirit of that, I would just add a comment that if you have a friend or a colleague or somebody that you know and you think they might be interested, this is in the spirit of growing. Please forward it to them so they can learn too. Any other questions right now? Those were the questions that we had. We're coming up in about 2 minutes to the end of the webinar here at 2 o'clock. So if there's a question, I'm going to pause here, and you could type it in now, and you would get a live answer.
Mike, we do have one question I think that we didn't address at the very bottom of the Q&A. May have just come in about 30 seconds ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. It just popped in. Yep.
Yeah, two actually. Two at the bottom.
Yep. Thank you very much. My apologies. There's a question here that says, we have some concern that will be put time and money into the project, but then the government will delay the requirements for another year again and again, because that has happened in the past. What are your thoughts on additional delays?
So, you know, if you, most of the people that we're trying to help are the small businesses today, right? And when you look at the messaging from the government and the numbers on how things are rolling out, one would think that, man, I'm just a small business out of the 600,000. I may not be able to, you know, they're not going to check up on me. What we generally say is they're going to apply pressure through your prime. So if you're working with the prime, it's going to be up to them to get their supply chain cleaned up, right? So you may not get a direct. The government says, hey, this is when it's due, but your prime is going to be motivated to get a better, cleaner supply chain, higher quality supply chain. So depending on how you do your business with the government, the requirement of delay is not necessarily a government thing. It really comes from your direct customer, which is going to be your prime. So that's where we want to focus our attention when it comes to small businesses. If you're a large business, you can ask this question to yourself, and that's what they're doing right now. Well, when do I need to be certified, and do I need to focus on my supply chain, or do I need to focus on my internal environment? Our mission here at Ignyte and Magnet is we're really trying to figure out how do we help the smalls, because they're getting a lot of pressure from their primes. And that's where the non-delay is going to come out, right? The government might say this is due in 2 years for everybody, but then they're going to write a requirement to say, in order for you to bid as a prime, give us a clean supply chain. And that's where your 2 year goes from 2 to probably 9 months or so. So that's what we're seeing, how it'll work. We work with a lot of tier ones. We do a lot of education on tier one suppliers internally and also externally. This is how they're perceiving it, is that they have to manage all of their suppliers. So that's where you're going to feel the pressure. And that's the timeline that matters more so than the government's timeline if you're a small business today.
There was a follow-up question. There was a follow-up question to that, what you just answered, Max, and that was that I'm trying to interpret a little bit. It says if the requirements are delayed and presumably to the primes, this wouldn't provide a competitive advantage if there was a delay to the prime. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a clarification on that. Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, if the requirements are delayed, then they are certainly delayed, right? But here's the thing, right? Just follow what the law says today, right? What we're waiting for is the CMMC. We're not waiting for what the law says. That's already been approved. And it says, hey, we have to do NIST 171. We have to have cyber hygiene. So again, if you revert back to the behavior, they're going to get harsher and harsher, right? So that's why whenever we are building and working on a program, we don't look at it from a tech perspective. We look at it, what is the requirement state? What is the law that is in place today? We work with that law today. And as things change, what we want to enable small government or small organization is reusability. Everything that you did before, can I reapply it to CMMC? So, the fact that requirements might be delayed is out of question. It's going to be CMMC certification that's going to be delayed. And again, don't have a clarity on it. We've got some numbers, some ranges. Some are saying soon, 6 months. Some are saying 5 years. But if you're a small, you got to look at what your direct customer is going to ask you, which is going to be your prime. They might be more sensitive. They might say, nope, I don't care if it's 5 years. I want it done in 9 months. If you don't, I'm starting to look for a replacement. And that's what we want to avoid as small businesses.
Thank you very much. I think that's the last question for now. I think I see maybe one or two more, and Max will respond as we said. Thank you very much, y'all, for attending. Again, hopefully you've gotten some additional information. I guess my comment as I close this out would be, Magnet is here for you, for your needs, help you to grow. Ignyte and our partnership is here to help you with CMM Level 3 and CMMC. Please take us up if there's anything we can do to help. Have a great day, and reach out to us for anything you need. Talk to you again. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.